Hello, hi, and welcome to Thank You Five, a weekly show hosted by Strawdog Theater Company, where we bring theater artists from around the globe into a conversation about live theater and digital storytelling with a spirit of gratitude and innovation. I am Kyle Hammond, your host for this evening. First time. This should be fun. And the creator and producer of Thank You Five as well. If you are watching this on YouTube, you can head over to strawdog.org/. Thank You Five to join the chat, ask questions, and more importantly, vote on questions so that we know what questions you want to ask our panelists tonight. Speaking of panelists, let's meet tonight's panelists. We're going to start with Audrey. Audrey, welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Audrey Billings. I'm the managing director at A Red Orchid Theatre, and I'm an ensemble member at American Blues Theater. Glad to be here.
Awesome. And we are also joined by Noah.
Hi there. So glad to be here. My name is Noah Elman. I'm a freelance director in Chicago and currently directing for Strawdog this December.
What's the show you're directing?
Oh, Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins. I guess I should say that part. Come see us.
And Scott.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott Silberstein, co-founder and exec producer of HMS Media, which is a production company that creates content for, with, and about the arts. I'm also a board member at Arts Alliance Illinois and an artistic associate at Looking Glass.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, Robert.
Yeah, hi, I'm Robert Koon. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a Chicago playwright, actor, and visual artist, and I'm happy to be here.
Excellent. Welcome to you all. And now that we've all met, I hope you have been pondering the first question. Sometimes a big question, sometimes it's a fairly straightforward question, but the question is, what is theater? And I'm going to let that sit for a second, and the first person to speak will be the first person to answer. I think that was Robert saying not it.
You know, I've been thinking about this question. Oh, God. I didn't want to be the first because I had this moment of like just tossing my proverbial drama teacher scarf around my neck and saying theater is life. But in
You'd be right.
In a lot of ways, theater is life, especially I think particularly now I've been having a lot of conversations about the importance of empathy and how theater has a role in reminding people of the plight of the world and the other people's stories, and to teach and evoke empathy for those people. And it's also, I think, really powerful to see yourself reflected on stage and hear those stories that you don't even realize you're going to maybe walk into the theater and connect with, and then walk out changed or awake in a way that you didn't expect to be, or devastated. And I think being able to tap into those kinds of emotions, it's just like so important when we were all so cut off from each other for so long. I think if you ask me in a year, I think my answer will be similar, but it is also an evolving question. I think that, what is theater? What is it for me today? What is it for me right now in this moment? What is it that I think we need theater to be right now? We talked a lot, even with A Red Orchid. Right now we're doing Revolution, which is a play that's actually like full of joy. There's still darkness in the human condition, but we talked a lot about how it started to feel like people needed to be able to be uplifted a little bit by theater as well. And I think that is part of what is so powerful about theater and storytelling, is that we do have the ability to make these offerings to say, we also are looking out. We're not, while we are actors and directors and art workers, and we're looking in all the time to, like, for our craft, we're also looking out at the world and saying, what's going on and how do we reflect that? And how can we change that or help to move something or move someone, or to move nothing, but to let you escape for an hour and nothing changes except that you feel better after leaving the theater. I think that is really a powerful thing. Somebody should stop. I will literally talk about this for an hour.
Well,
Feel free to interrupt me. I will literally talk for an hour.
Well, I think you nailed on
We'll
it.
make everything easy for the rest of us.
Yeah, great. Yeah, feel free.
I think you nailed it with you started with this theater is life, and that's but then the follow-up is it is all of those things. Like that is the thing with life, and the thing with theater is it's a multitude, it's complex, it's this and it's also that. It's not just a simple answer. So
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in here. I feel like that was so much about how theater makes us feel, which was one way I was thinking of answering this question. I sort of thought about it in terms of what is it as a medium, and I didn't want to go first as well because I sort of had a purposely ambiguous answer to it, which was a sense of liveness and a sense of event, right? And specifically liveness. I think that is ambiguous in itself purposefully. I think that, as you mentioned, right, in this time right now, we need so much light and uplifting. I think the pandemic caused us to sort of figure out what theater meant in this new world where we couldn't step into the theaters that we loved, and it was really scary, right? But I think it is kind of joyous in the way that theater has sort of transformed from one structure for obviously not over the centuries, but in the past decades, it feels like it's sort of been in one structure in some ways, and this sort of expanding of what we decide to call theater. I was remarking, I keep bringing this up over and over again because I think it's fascinating that I saw that John Cameron Mitchell was producing a play that is only available on OnlyFans, and that is I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if I'm going to see it, but that is a fascinating concept to me, that is where the world that we live in now. So that's my answer for it. And someone else should now talk.
I think, there's the standard definition, right? A collaborative art form that involves storytelling and it's live in front of people. And I don't want to get away from the basicness of that, and just because it's simple doesn't mean it's not profound. And the carrying out of that, the participation of it, particularly, and I guess I would argue imperatively, in the pursuit of and the surrender to truth. I feel it's incumbent on us to kind of reclaim theater. I hear people talking, for example, about what's going on in the House of Representatives right now, and people saying this and that, and, oh, it's just bad theater. As long as they say it's bad theater, but it isn't really, it isn't even really theater either. It's a bunch of weird. None of those people. I mean, they would have a problem in their first theater class. And I do think that we would solve a lot of problems by telling Congress, take a 3-month break, come to Chicago, and take our theater and improv class. And there's some basic tenets, and not because you're going to do what I think is right, but you're going to do a better job doing whatever it is you think you're doing. Also, we will weed out a lot of people who, for whom listening and responding is just not their thing. So I think, it's behavior, it's relationships, it's a chance to experience the uncomfortable comfortably, the unsafe safely. And when it really works, I think, is whether you're the least experienced amateur or the most experienced professional. Again, I said it before, but I think it's worth repeating, this relentless pursuit of honesty, this extraordinary surrender to truth, which is why we can get moved I can get moved in my 11-year-old's play at Mudlark, and why I can be dismayed by a $25 gazillion musical, if that's not being honest. But if my little Addie is, then that's theater. And I think what's special about Chicago theater is, I think on the whole, these are ethics and tenets that we usually understand, and we're pretty good in collaboration of surrendering to them. So I find myself saying the word surrender a lot, but I think maybe that's part of it. Empty it out so you can receive it.
Yeah, I would start to jump on something that Audrey said. When somebody asked me, what is theater? I would say, well, it depends on the day. Sometimes, it is the most exhilarating, joyful thing that we can do. We are working together to create a thing that just lives in the moment between, the technical people, the other actors, the audience. Everybody is in a room sharing this experience of these stories that we create to give meaning to our experiences of life. And those days, it's exhilarating, it's wonderful, it's fabulous. And some days it's an absolute pain in the ass because it demands everything of you as an artist, as a practitioner of theater, as a human being. It demands everything of you and is often very stingy with what it returns to you. So I mean, this is a selfish frame of reference for what is theater, but these things are all true. Some of the theater is life. Sometimes life is good. Sometimes life sucks, and we have to be open to embracing all those aspects of life in ways to just bring this up and to have a way to examine this together. You've talked about Thank You Five as being people examining theater in a digital age, and theater is inherently analog. We need to be in the room together. Otherwise, it's a TV show or it's a movie. Because if you are not there, present in the theater, you are not affecting what goes on. And every person in that audience affects what goes on. And we've all had this experience. We have it all the time. The most popular movie right now does not care if anybody is there to watch it. Doesn't care. Doesn't change. It's all going to be the same. It would run the same in a full theater with people having a great time, and in an empty theater with nobody there. Nothing changes. Everybody in theater is absolutely connected to what is being created at the moment, and that's something that's really unique.
This is where I push back, and Noah is.
I'm also going to push back. Yeah, no, I'm going to jump in because I agree with everything that you've said, except for the part that requires us to be in the theater together.
Yeah.
Because I think that there is a way, and we live in a world now, and it is a quickly evolving world where there is an option to not be in the room together and still call it theater. And that's why I say that sense of liveness. When I was beginning to create work at the beginning of the pandemic, and I sat down with a group of people that I was creating with, and we tried to boil it down to how do we make this not a TV show, right? And the thing that we landed on, the essential truth of it, was that it was live, right? Was that even if they weren't there with us in person, they were connecting in real time with each other. And
so was TV in the 50s.
But I don't think so, because it was connecting across not just the people sitting in one room, but across the globe at that point. I mean, really, truly across the globe. We had people, people in Europe and South America, playwrights that came to work with us, and performers that were in those places as well. And it was a beautiful amount of connection happening. And I think we have to allow it to transform in that way, because people inherently want to sit at home now, which is unfortunate. I want people to be in theaters, but I think that there is a way to bring that sense of community to them wherever they are.
Yeah, but that's not the same thing as live theater. It's not.
Yeah, I feel like it's a new designation of theater, because as someone who did an entire run of a show on Zoom during COVID, I will tell you, it's not the same. It's just not. And it was beautiful, and it was amazing to have people in the middle of the night, on another continent watching the show and tuning in. And because of the nature of the show, this was It's a Wonderful Life with American Blues during the pandemic. it allowed us to connect in a way that definitely wasn't happening anywhere. And it felt very live. And we opened up the room for people to chat with us afterwards so that it had some sense of what we bring into the space. And so, and I agree with you that the part of the magic was that it was live. We tuned into a fresh Zoom link every single day. It was still dependent on us being who we were in that day, on that moment. But it's not the same as what I would consider like live theater, and like when we are all in the space together with the audiences there. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I do think it's a different designation of theater.
Yes.
My pushback to echo with Noah, yes, it's live, and yes, it's different. But to the argument, I've heard this argument, and
I'm getting ready to throw down, Kyle. Let's do
the yes, the liveness. The long story short, you don't have to be in the same room to experience all of the things that we just discussed, truth and surrender and a group of behavior and all of these things can happen online. It may not happen for you, and it may not happen the way you are used to performing, but the same, like, because like when I hear that argument, the same way of like, I don't like these new computers that are running the sound. I liked when we had the old reel-to-reel tapes, and it worked. Like I liked having an orchestra, and the orchestra was one that played the music, not these speakers that I can't see or whatever. So it's different, and it's changing, and it's evolving. But I can't be the one to say that it's not theater.
I'd like to continue on that.
It's not live theater.
It is
without an
live
audience.
theater.
It's not live
It
theater.
absolutely is live theater. It absolutely is live theater. It is
Not
different.
without an audience.
I just want to pause and have everybody look at Scott, just like taking a nice little sip of drink while we're...
I think
because if the audience is not present in the room, they are not affecting what's happening.
Okay, sorry.
100% disagree with that.
Thank you for bringing that up. That was the other part of if the in the room you are coming. I am coming. When I hear that, I think of the old Strawdog Theater at 3829, where there were less than 70 seats in the house, and if somebody breathed heavy, you were affecting the room. Real quick side note story: I kissed my now wife. She was just a person that I met on stage, and there were kids in the front audience that when I kissed her, they all went, ew. So yes, talk about affecting the play. Absolutely. There are also theater performances that the nearest person watching the stage is 70 rows back and could be unwrapping and talking on their phone, and the actor has no idea that that's happening because they're so far removed. So
absolutely. I mean, let's
also considered theater.
Let's talk about it in a classical sense, right? I mean, we can't stand in the room when this happens, right? But a Greek amphitheater with the 2,000 people that sat there, I don't think that they were affecting in the same way that they would in a Chicago storefront. And I think that it is categorically not true that an online audience cannot affect each other and the performance. Categorically untrue. What I do agree is that a lot of the work we're seeing now is not doing a good job of that. But I have the impression that many people watched one Zoom production early on in the pandemic and decided that it wasn't possible. And I do not think that is an indication that it's not possible, right? I just think that that's an indication that we didn't know how to do it yet.
I mean, I might be biased, but because I think
we're all biased.
I think Blues did an incredible job. I'm not kidding. Like, they set us up with backdrops. I mean, it was
100%. Yes, I don't mean that to say that your production was not.
No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it to like defend the production. Although I think at the time, when people were trying to figure it out, I thought that Blues was like ahead of the game. They like fully understood that they were trying to create a theatrical experience through Zoom. And here's where I think it lands in the middle for me. one of the things we discussed when the world kind of opened up again was like, do we still offer at least one show a week virtually? Because we did discover that we had so many audiences that were not in Chicago now and had moved because of the pandemic or whatever reason. And there was this kind of idea of like, do we have now kind of this duty to create a virtual version of live theater for folks who still want to experience it? Because people loved it. I mean, people were fully engaged. They got to engage with us. I think for me, I was like, I think the only way I would want to do virtual theater is if I can still be in the room with my castmates, because I want to fall in love with my scene partner.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think that's an essential truth to me.
Yeah.
And Zoom theater is not that most of the time. You are not.
Right. But online theater is not Zoom theater.
And online theater is, you have that when you're doing a TV show. You have that if you're doing a film. You have the opportunity to fall in love with your cast members. That happens all the time. But there's no audience in the room. There needs to be an audience in the room. If we want people to come back to theater
on this, because I think virtual, again, I think it's about the actors being in the space together, building.
Well, this is where it begins, but the play is never finished until the audience takes it out with them.
Oh gosh, I love the process too much to agree with.
The process leads up to that moment, because I tell you, as a playwright, you finish the script, you have something that's absolutely insufficient to the task at hand. It has to pass through a lot of hands. People are going to add to it, and the people who take it, the last people who add to it and take it out with them every night, is the audience. Playwright can bring it in, the audience takes it out, and that's the completion of the experience. And then it happens again the next night. But if we want people to start coming back to live theater, we need to start emphasizing the thing that makes this experience qualitatively different from sitting at home and watching the TV. Because if we don't, they're not.
Well, and I'll agree with you with that, because when people have a choice, they'll say, if you get them out, they're going to stay at home. I want them to buy tickets.
Yeah, right. I do just want to pause it.
See the art.
I want to pause it, right? And because I agree that having the people in the room are important, right? But I want to pause it that why is it not worth going to the audiences where they are, right? We're convincing some to come back, obviously. I mean, theater is, whatever it is growing back. It is coming back. We see that every day. It is happening. But apparently there's a limit right now, right? And I think the struggle is to say, let's not take them where they are and what they want from us, right? And do that. Now, what I can agree with is that it is 9 times out of 10, a worse experience for the performers, for the creative team, right? It is harder to make theater that is online for the people making it. What I take issue with is that it is less meaningful to the audience. It may be harder and less meaningful to the performers, but I personally want to make work that is for the audience, and I think it can be equally as meaningful for the audience if it is online.
Yes.
Well, movies and film and TV can also be incredibly meaningful.
Absolutely. They can.
But they're meaningful in a different way. They take you to a different place.
I don't think we're actually getting completely organized around the full potential of the question. And I think this is something that our sector has to deal with. If anyone follows one of the, I think, great thinkers and writers about the arts, Ben Cameron, former head of the Jerome Foundation and Doris Duke Charitable Trust.
DCG, yeah.
It's a pretty genius guy, and I appreciate his invitation to explore this as a time of both and instead of either or.
Yeah.
I don't think there's one way to present theater on screens. And there's some of it I'm not particularly interested in myself. Some of it doesn't move me at all. But let's like define what we're talking about. In the early parts of the pandemic, I think we were going to get organized around whatever kind of storytelling we could get. And some of it was like, okay, you know what, it's the closest I can get to food, so I'll eat it. Right. And then there were people, that said, the first thing I saw, and I will call back to this later because it's going to have to do with a recommendation that I'll offer later on. Backroom Shakespeare Project did a freaking genius thing. And I think maybe within a month of shutting down, where they did something that felt live and present and in the moment through the mediums. They did Midsummer Night's Dream, and depending on what class of people we were dealing with, what scenes, some of them were communicating on YouTube, some were on Instagram, some were, when the players are doing their bit at the end, the royals are watching it on YouTube and commenting on it, and it felt live. And I think we have to talk about the feeling of it. Like, would I rather be in a theater? I would, in the same sense that I would rather be at the Sphere watching U2 than whatever video comes out of it, and how I'd much rather be at a Bengals game rooting my hometown team on. But it is still sports when I'm watching at home. And so, in a sense, it's always been hybrid. I mean, I don't buy the complete parallels between sports and the arts, but there already is some hybrid thing there. And I know that athletes know that there's something happening live and something happening on the other side of the cameras. And I think this has to do with an evolution. It's strange, during this conversation, I was thinking about the end of the Christopher Nolan film Interstellar, where, part of it is just, you kind of got to surrender to the idea that there's this fifth dimension.
Yeah.
That people who have evolved to process 5 dimensions go, well, of course time folds back like this. And so it all makes sense to them. I'm finding, and listen, I'm to clarify, there are early on in the pandemic, we repurposed some of our archival video of some live performance, and that was just, we're all starving, here's the closest we can come.
Yeah.
Food, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yep.
There were, and I did not I considered it theater adjacent, and I considered it advocating for the art form. But when we do, and it's about to get publicly announced, and I guess this is the first place I can talk about it publicly.
Breaking news:
Looking Glass Alice to PBS in December. It's going to be, by definition, I think I'm safe in saying, the most widely seen piece of Chicago theater ever, by virtue of the fact that it's going to get into somewhere around 600,000 viewers in U.S. and Canada. It's going to go to, and we're working on some educational stuff. There's just millions of people are going to see it. It's captured live. It was captured in a way that couldn't be done in one pass. I still don't. So it had filmic techniques, but it's theater. It's live, and you are experiencing the actors, experiencing the audience. Here's the way I look at it. There's some arts on television that is so clearly, let's get 15 cameras in front of it to make sure we don't miss anything. And that is safe and
safe.
Not at all, in that sense, not at all theatrical. It's so you don't miss anything. And part of the way you can tell that is they never miss anything. One of the geniuses, if you ever go to see the National Theater, NT Live, and I've gone over that. I actually had the pleasure of sitting with them when they did Of Mice and Men from Broadway, and then also Antony and Cleopatra. 6 cameras, all but one having a certain, all but 2 having a certain dynamic quality to them. Sometimes it's the big move, but very often it's, you're on a slider suggesting certain senses of depth. And it's happening live. So if someone jumps their line, they're like a second earlier than they were before, and then they have to direct to it. When the shot is a second behind, that feels live. And if you watch them, I've asked them about this, and I know that in rare circumstances they'll make fixes, but most of the time they won't make a fix. There's a crash zoom in the middle of a piece. It's in. What does that feel like in the audience? It's happening right now. And it is when you're watching it in the UK. It's not here, but it feels live. And in talking with them and having talked with some of the actors, the fact that they know that's happening does inform their process, their performance. It's a different dimension. It's not, I get it's not what we've always, craved and what we've experienced. But it's, it is theatrical, it is often theater, and that it has value in, I'm going to steal some Looking Glass phraseology here, but changing, charging, and empowering people and wanting to lean into the experience. I think it has enormous, it is an experience, it is transformative, it does stick with you. And I think that people, when they know they're making it in theatrical settings, I mean, I get what you're saying, Robert. It's not, if they were shooting it film style, let's do all these multiple takes and we'll cut together. That's one thing.
Yeah.
If it's performed, that's only a little of what I'm saying, because one of the things you say is they do 6 cameras and then the process is edited and you watch what the editor and the director wants you to see. When you're sitting there in the theater, you watch what you choose to see.
Well, yes and no,
because that's a completely different.
There are directors who absolutely, by using theatrical devices, tell you where your eye's going and tell you how things are being staged. So I think it's a different dimension. It's a different iteration. I think we have to be. And the most. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, please, Scott. No, I was just gonna say that intention. I guess my feeling is when I'm watching something, I start to feel the intentionality behind it. And the instructions I always want my directors and my camera ops is, what we're doing right now is we are telling the story of what it was like to be in the room when this thing happened, right? And because it's about theater, it is theatrical. Now, I'm not saying, if it would be interesting to sit in a room with all of you and watch Looking Glass Alice to see if you feel a way about it that I felt about it. But the idea wasn't, let's see what Scott Silberstein, producer, or director Matt Hoffman, or even the editor Christy Fall wanted you to see. What did David Catlin want you to experience? Right. And what did these actors want to convey to you? And let's tell the story about what it was like to be in the presence of that. And I would argue that while it's not that pure experience of being in the room, it is still theater. It's just this other dimension that we are honestly being forced to evolve. And I would just add this one other thing, if I could. The fact that it can happen on cameras means there are people who would never otherwise be in the theater who, as a performer in the process, are now going to experience it. There's economic barriers, there's accessibility barriers, geographic barriers. You're reaching people as a result of this. I reject the notion that that's meaningless and doesn't play into it, because you're now doing something that you could never otherwise do. And I think that can inform what's happening in the room, however many cameras are pointed at you. Well, you talk about things that have the appearance of being live. And I'll be very clear. I think TV, there's great TV, there are great films. Great art is great art. But we're talking about something that is really particular and different. Beyond Burgers tastes like hamburgers. You get the experience of a hamburger. It's not a hamburger. Okay, can I ask a question though? Who cares? Depends. You know what I mean? Yeah. I mean, ultimately, that's a glib question, and it is a glib question, and I understand what you mean by it. But there are people who can't see theater, so they can't experience what the actors and everybody are doing. And that's fine. This has got to be available to everybody. But that person sitting at home does not affect what happens on stage. It might affect the ability for that artist or theater company to go on performing and to go on and have a life and to extend the sector, which, let's be honest, is not something that the majority of performing arts organizations in this country right now can safely say they know is going to happen. In the moment, what effect do they have? I reject the notion that we can't make online theater that does just that. I mean, I've had conversations with Kyle and many other people about the ability to bring an online audience into the experience. I'm, of course, forgetting the name of the piece and the artist, and I apologize for that. But I remember speaking with an artist about a piece that he was developing, I believe, at ASU, where they had an online audience it was an alleyway style, right? And online was sitting on one, in person was sitting on one side, and online was on the other side, and they had cameras on, and they were looking back at the live audience.
Now that is an online experience, right? And that is categorically has to be affecting the performers in that space. Now, I completely agree that most online theater has not achieved this yet, right? Or is trying to achieve this, or is still in that beyond burger moment, right? I can agree with that. But the idea that it cannot achieve the same thing, I think is not true. I think we are learning now in this moment how to do that, right? And every time we get closer and closer, I haven't seen The Looking Glass, Alice. I'm excited to see it, right? This is it's another step. What is another step and another step, and it'll get closer and closer and closer, and we can achieve that. I do believe we can achieve an online audience affecting the people in the space. I think it is.
I think it's a fool's errand. I think it's a fool's errand, and I don't
But
think
it's
I
what
think,
the
I think that
audiences
is.
want.
Is it? Is it? If you take an audience who's been watching TV and watching movies and bring them to the theater, do they have a qualitatively different experience? Is it the same? Is it ever going to be the same if they're on a screen or if they're present in the room?
I'm not asking you for it to be the same experience.
Exactly.
You're saying we can do the same. We can do the same thing, and I'm saying we can't do the same thing.
Audrey is trying to jump in.
Please,
I think that here's the reality: is that we are living in a world where it's not going away. We created a new genre of theater during the pandemic. That's real life, right?
And that's great.
Like, it's not going away. So I think it's figuring out, like, how do we embrace it? What is the most effective way to do it that is fulfilling both for the audience and for the actors? Like I said, I think that there was a lot of value to having done a run on Zoom. I would have preferred to be in the theater with my fellow actors and it being live streamed. That is very expensive. So here's the other thing, right? We're talking about how this can takes down the barrier for some audiences to be able to see theater that they haven't seen before. And while I think that is true, creating like live stream performances and what is involved in that is also an economic barrier for smaller theaters that run on very tight budgets. So I do think that we're exploring kind of unknown depths. But the reality is that it's not going away. So like, how do we use it in an effective way? I don't think it can be I would never, no offense to someone who maybe wants to, this is just my personal opinion, I wouldn't want to be part of a digital theater company whose like sole purpose in life is to create digital theater. Like, to me, that is so uninteresting. But I do think that it has a space to just harken back to blues again, because I actually do think they're doing this like remarkable job of balancing the two. They do a reading on Zoom every month that you can tune into and hear a play read by very talented actors who are all sitting in their respective living rooms. And it's wonderful. And you get to hear a piece of theater that maybe nobody's producing right now. And I think that's really exciting. And so there are uses there. I don't think we're going to get away from it. So it's really about what is the best way to create the art in this new kind of segment of theater.
And also to use the medium as a way to, again, this is why I try to avoid the binary stuff as much as possible. It's got to be this or it's got to be that.
Right.
There is a specific, I agree, there's a specific experience that only happens when you're in a room. No question. I just feel like it doesn't serve us well to say that anything other than that is not theater or not theatrical, because not only can it be, and maybe this is outside the scope, and please feel free to say this is not what we want to talk about tonight, but there's things that we can do with it to create, to tell stories about the stories, to tell stories about the storytellers. I don't think every play belongs as a full capture, and we've flat out rejected some of the opportunities to do it, but guided them like, but we can tell the story about the story, and to say we risk alienating. And I've been in a position over the last year and a half where I'm out like trying to find underwriters for some of these big projects, right? And they feel alienated in ways. If we keep telling them, if we keep saying the message out that the only way to experience theater is inside a building, the only way to get introduced to it, not only do people feel put off by that, but I've had in the last I would say 4 or 5 weeks, 3 different people say they use the sports thing. 2 people just said, well, I'm a bigger sports fan now because it's on. I know I'm not there, but it's evolved now. The whole form has evolved, that there are other ways to be interactive. And someone pointed out the Blackhawks were going to die because they didn't want to put them on TV.
Built because Wirtz didn't want to put them on TV.
Didn't want to put them on TV. Now, is watching it on TV the same thing as being in a hockey game? No. Sometimes I experience the game better on TV.
In the United Center,
there are and I'm not saying that it wouldn't be super exciting to be in the back left corner in the farthest, hugest theater of Hamilton, but I see the action differently. I think it's our responsibility, frankly, to feed what I hope is a cyclonic ecosystem where one drives you to the other, and they all evolve in the process. And you see what works. It's too early to know what doesn't work. It's just barely soon enough to see a couple things that do. And in the 3.5 decades I've been running HMS, it's the big cliche. The more I learn, the more I know I don't know here. But it's been fascinating. I think there were folks involved in the Looking Glass Alice project who at first were like, what are you, a one-off regional theater on public television? And then they saw it. And within the system, people got stronger with it. I mean, is it going to change the world? Maybe a little bit for one person. That would be a victory. But isn't that the same thing? It is an invitation into this field, into this experience. And I think we need to look at those opportunities. Otherwise, we are going to come off a bit tyrannical of saying, no, just this. If not that, then you are not part of the club. You're not part of it. You haven't really experienced it. Shouldn't we just be delighted that someone got a taste, leaned in, and if that thing got them in, there are people who are going to ball games right now.
Using it.
Yeah, I'd like to yes and that because I think too is that when we talk about the barrier, right? Or I think even sometimes it's just like the lack of introduction to this kind of assumption of what theater is. And then you see, like, I'm just going to use Hamilton as an example because it was so broadly televised and so wildly successful. But seeing Hamilton on Disney Plus did not make you not want to see it live. For a lot of people, it was the reason to then be excited about seeing it in person. So I think that, like, all of these things are true. You know what I mean? Like, I think the same way that, like, we can introduce, it creates accessibility to maybe people who can't get to the theater for access reasons or financial reasons, it opens that door. But it also opens the door to all these people who are like, oh, that was so much cooler than I thought it was going to be, or that is like so awesome, and now I want to go see theater. I want to go see it live, and maybe I can't get a ticket to Hamilton, but there's this other show that people talk about called Hadestown, so I'm going to go to Hadestown. And I think that, we have to think about also, like, I've been talking a lot about this, about the ways that we can lift each other up, and like just be like the success of one theater company doing something successfully can lead to the success of many others as well. So I think, I don't know, I'm saying a lot of words.
No, I mean, what I would feed on that, because I brought this up at an early Thank You 5, is what one of my harebrained ideas was true community theater. And so, like, in Chicago, if each ward had its own ward theater, and so what that does is make you want to go see your ward's theater or your community's theater. And so, yeah, I saw Hamilton. I can't fly to New York. I can't go get lottery tickets and go to, but I can go down the street and see my neighbor perform such and such play that's happening for free down the street, or whatever that is. So it pulls us back into theater, which is maybe not, to Scott's point earlier about like the 11-year-old performance through was it Mudlark, right?
Mudlark, yeah.
Yeah, like that. I can be moved by that, since I can't buy a ticket to, holy cow, they did this spectacle thing that's a huge budget show, like, but I can experience this, like, and it all feeds into itself. Anyway,
I would also, if I could add this other, when we're talking about what's the effect, because I think, Robert, the point, I'm fascinated by it, and I'm checking myself. about this idea about audience, they're not affecting anything. Again, and maybe the interstellar thing is the right metaphor here, because it requires a different kind of interpretation of what we're doing within the, forgive me, time-space continuum. But let me just posit that somebody gets to experience this who might not otherwise have done it. And in some ways, it's more intimate, or it can be. It's a different kind of intimacy is probably the best way to put it. But that person, those people now have an appreciation, a connection to it, right?
Yeah.
And over time, those people wind up being supporters, or, they vote differently. They participate in systems that let them fund things differently. They decide, I think the people who are artists, and I think ideally are connected to them, somewhere in there is an inner advocate or activist. If some more of those people wind up getting involved, because in theaters, like we actually practice civics, right? Which we don't teach anymore. We know this because there's a lot of, I don't even want to call them bad actors in government right now. They're people, going down runways and trying to win beauty contests, beauty in quotes, who don't know, it's like people who buy the outfit and the makeup to audition, but have never acted before. If we get more people who are, by virtue of spreading this out as much as we can, and we have to, right now, the challenge is there. And those people wind up making decisions that now are feeding the performing arts ecosystem. And if we follow that full circle around, if we start talking about this in those terms, that those artists in front of that, in that performance that's being captured, they know that, okay, it's not happening in the room right now. But if we tap into a different part of the brain that says, as a result of this, the whole theatrical, the whole performing arts not-for-profit sector gets reinvented, rethought, then hell yes, they are being impacted in that moment, even though the actual impact might be days, weeks, months, years down the line. We, I think, in the arts have to embrace that way of perceiving the work we do. Otherwise, I think we risk, I don't know that, I am not saying we mean this, but we risk being perceived as exclusive and tyrannical. And we cannot afford that in our sector.
But but you seem to be talking more about how we use these things to reach out to people. And to talk about,
well, what is but isn't that what we're doing in a live piece? We're trying to reach out to that audience. Now we're doing it immediately like that, but I think it's incumbent on us to rethink
that is the shared experience I'm talking about in a live theater. It's not to say that there's not theatricality possible in other mediums. One of the greatest, my favorite film, All That Jazz, is about as freaking theatrical as anything's going to get on screen, and it's wonderful. And there are TV shows that are theatrical. When I talked about the old Playhouse 90, they were live pieces that were shot on TV. But it is not, for me as an audience member, that person is not hearing me breathe. That person is not hearing me move in my seat. That person is not understanding anything. If we want to talk about what the Greeks were doing, the architecture of those theaters was created so that the person furthest away could hear everything that was said on stage.
Yeah.
And
right, but not vice versa.
If you have 2,500 people, you are going to feel response from them all the time.
I respect the preferred experience. I absolutely do. And I prefer the experience of being there live too. I would love to be in in the room where it's my inadvertent sneeze that makes you come up with some cool thing to, I don't, and I would love to be, if the Phillies and Diamondbacks are playing, I'd love to be there too. I'd love to be at most things that I saw. I took our kids to see the Taylor Swift film, which, by the way, by the end of it, 3/4 of the audience was dancing in front of the movie screen. And I think Taylor Swift knew that was going to happen. And I think it impacted everything that happened in front of those cameras. I think we just have to make sure that while we hold on to that which is the most important to us, we don't deny other people the possibility of happiness within this experience, of being transformed in this experience. And we need to make sure that we do not deny our sector the possibility of growth and expansion, because we have a preference. I think it's incumbent upon us to surrender to broader definitions.
Well, if we were talking, the initial question was, what is theater? What is this medium? Now, if we're going to talk about what There are televised theater, there's cinematic theater. There are things that give you the illusion of being live. There are things that we do to show an outreach for other people. These are all things that happen around theater. And they're good and they're necessary. They're good and they're necessary. And I think that's terrific. But there is something qualitatively different.
I'm wondering what we lose. But what do we lose by broadening?
No, I'm not talking about that. I'm saying that right now at the core, there is something that is qualitatively different. And if we do not hold fast to the thing that is qualitatively different while we do these other things, we're going to lose that.
But I don't think
I'm curious. People are
going to come to like just let it go. I don't think anybody's saying we're going to walk away from live theater. I cannot imagine a world in which that would happen.
No.
I mean, I work I think A Red Orchid has one of the most intimate spaces in Chicago. It's incredible. I think the theater experience in that theater is so special. I might be a little biased, but it's so special and it's so intimate, and you feel every heartbeat in that room when you are in there, and it truly is magical. But I don't think that I think somehow this has turned into like a debate of like which one should survive. Like we're like about to like be in a mud wrestling match about like which one is
not
better.
For me.
And I think it's like a segment. I think that we're talking about the segmentations of theater that the way that they're all related. They're all built around the core. I would agree with you, Robert, in that there's nothing like the magic of being in a space and the way I just was talking about this with people when theater is like really powerful, when music is really powerful, and when the audience is together in a room, there are scientific studies where everybody's heartbeats sync up. That is like, that doesn't necessarily not happen inside of a movie theater either, but there's something really magical about sharing that space together. So, I think that it is the core, right? It's like the core.
I prefer it too. I prefer it.
I mean, I love making digital theater, and I also love being in the space. I'm curious, Robert. The question that comes to mind, right, is that it is a different experience. I don't think that anyone here in this call is not even. I think that it could be very, very close, but I understand that there is a difference. I'm wondering what you feel that we lose by broadening our definition of theater. What do we lose from that core experience that you're talking about by also including these other elements? What does that make worse about the initial, if that feels
it doesn't have to make it worse. It is different. I don't know if you're losing anything. I'm talking about what the kernel and the core of this is, because that was what the question was.
So now, I'm going to drop a bomb on this, and so whereas there's oftentimes been a conversation. I'm going to drop this bomb and then we're going to move on, because the bomb is two things. What does it mean to be live, and what does it mean to be in the room? Like, so once you start to define what is theater, you also start to have to define what is live, and you also have to define what is in the room. Like, how can we share a space, and how can we be in the same space? What is space? What do you mean by space? What do you mean by time? What do you mean by live? And so again, it goes back to having the conversation, which we have had for over 45 minutes before we got to any of our. We were
worried we had nothing to talk about.
Exactly. So
I think this is one of those questions that ends with a lot of empty wine bottles and hours of discussion.
Bingo, and we'll do that later. But for now, I'm going to just mention that Carm mentions that we should start betting on live theater, and that would make it a lot like sports.
All right, write it down.
Richard's going to die at the end.
Let's do it.
Yeah. But in the meantime, we're going to try and get like at least one question from the audience in before we go. And I'm going to throw it out to whoever wants to jump in. But the first question from the audience is, let's go. E.M. Davis asks, has there ever been a moment where you have thought of leaving theater altogether? And if so, what brought you back in? Let's bring us all back together. Who's got something bringing us back together?
Never wanted to leave it.
So,
oh gosh, I've left.
You did leave,
and I've come back. Yeah. I've left and I've taken long breaks. I left for like 3 years right after college, and it's like a nagging little thing inside your head that's like, what's happening? Why aren't you doing that right now?
And I asked, did you want to, or did you have to for some other purpose? Because part of the tricky part of the question is some people have to.
Yeah, the first time I left was fear, and kind of like this idea, youth, of being like just leaving on my own terms, and to go figure out what I wanted. I think it made me a better actor in the end. I think coming back under my own kind of with a thoughtfulness was really helpful. And the second time I left, we moved and life kind of changed. And so both were pretty much under my own steam. But I think that, theater is a little bit like Chicago. It kind of gets under your skin and just stays there. And you always just end up coming back. I don't know. The city has always been like that for me too. It's like I leave and then I'm like, I miss it. So it's, it just, it sucks you back in. But yeah, I've left, and it's with sadness, but also I think for a time of great discovery, and then to come back with a greater sense of myself and purpose. So I think there's value in leaving if you aren't sure what you're doing or want to figure that out. I think that there's value in stepping away.
As long as it always feels like a choice, I think that's helpful.
Yeah. As long as you're not being shoved out the door.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of my favorite movies. Ultimately, is about the movie About Time. That ultimately, you could travel through time, but ultimately the trick is to live each day as if you chose to come back to it for a particular.
Oh, man, I cried so much in that movie.
Yeah, and I still do. It's one of those movies that, and like Defending Your Life, the ones you got to watch every year just to make sure you're still alive and on the planet and being honest. Choice has a lot to do with it, and intentionality. And I think that's something I'm sure we all share. And it's one of the nice things about our community, individually, the gig can be terrifying, but we find ways in Chicago. We're like dedicated to ensemble and improvisational ethics. It requires other people. It doesn't occur if you're in this community. It really doesn't, even a one-person show, you better have the people you trust, because there's no such thing as a one-person show. So it's one of the great things about being here. And one of the things I like about the stories we can tell about what we do here. And this was the joy of we made documentaries about Steppenwolf in the Second City. Again, Robert, to your point, because the magic of improvisation in the room, I've seen a lot of people point cameras at the Second City. Doesn't work. It's not the same thing. But if you check the process and start dealing with the kind of, this is how we do it and why we do it, then you go, oh, that's way more interesting than I thought. I got to get myself to the Second City. I think that's valuable,
hugely valuable.
Yeah, and it wasn't theater; it was a documentary. So I'm not trying to conflate the two, but to be able to tell those stories and have people sense. And I hope I want more Chicago theater in front of people around the world. Partially, I want more people to move here and make more work and join us who like this ethic, because I think more people like what we do here, actually like it, than what goes on in other places, because the reason we do it here is why you should want to live here and move here. To echo, and I maybe this is a callback that brings us back, but theater is life. We freaking believe that.
Yeah.
This community, for all of our foibles, and do we have individuals and communities? We all need to do better. Yeah, but I mean, on the whole, I want to tell funders who are looking at us and saying, you better make sure that pick on some other sector that doesn't nimbly respond to life in the world in the moment the way we do. And by in the moment, I mean, we'll design a new season based on what's happening in the world right now. You want to criticize us for not having all the right people on the boards? Help us with a seismic economic change so we can do that, because we're the sector that will do that. We crave it. We want it. And so in that sense, I don't know if we ever leave it. I mean, we physically may have to do something else, but thank God, Audrey, you didn't leave it. You never left it. You never left. You're right here because it won't leave you.
I just keep coming back.
You're just taking a break.
I mean, look at that, the passion in all of us. Ultimately, what's great is we pretty much all agree. We just can't wait to mix it up and find all these ways to do it. And there's not a lot of where else can you get in a room and all root for the same thing?
It's pretty phenomenal.
You can't find a church or a synagogue that does that these days. Theaters, you can. You're always rooting for that same thing. And I think if we bring that to the screen, and I think we can, then we've created, maybe it settles into something that's merely an augmentation. That's okay if it changes the world by a few molecules. I'm fine with that. Let's just like hang out together and figure out what it is. And, you know, we've invented a bunch of stuff in Chicago. Let's invent this.
Robert, you real quick, you wanted to jump in and say something.
Well, I was just speaking to EM's question. Has there been a time you've ever wanted to quit theater? I just want to say, you mean like today? Or, you know, this week? Of course. Yeah. And it goes back to what I was saying way back at the beginning. Is that some days it's the most exhilarating, joyful thing you can do, and sometimes it's the most humongous pain in the ass because it demands everything of you and does not guarantee you any return for that. Anything.
Yeah, it didn't take a vow.
Anybody who's been doing this for a while, you've had to fuck this. I'm going. Screw you guys. I'm going home.
Yeah.
It doesn't make the same vow to you that you made to Ed.
But the thing that brings me back is that moment as an actor that I just call standing in the dark, wearing someone else's shoes, waiting to step into the light. And there are people out there. I'm not doing this for myself. I'm doing it not just for them, but I'm doing this with them. And you know, one of the great problems in society today is isolation. Is that there's starting to be a lack of communal activity. And this is one of the things that we have the tremendous opportunity to foster. And through online things, through film, we have the opportunity to do that. But the core of it is, you want to know what's being in the room is, can the person on stage see you? And I mean, you can stand on stage at the Goodman and you can see that back row of the balcony.
See, now that means I have to ask the question: what is the stage, and what is the
where the performers?
That's a whole nother hour.
We're going to do a whole nother hour, but that's
where the performers are.
A great way.
When I come back to this, I'm just saying there is something qualitatively available to me in life that is not available to me anywhere else.
I want to sideways guess.
It's worth all the things that you give up. It's worth I don't have a huge 401k. I happen to have married very well, so I do have health insurance. There are a lot of things that you give up to do this, especially when you're doing this, because I remember the space. One of my first plays was produced there on Broadway. But there is something qualitative that you give up, but there is something qualitatively available to you that is not available elsewhere in life.
That may be one of the reasons, one of the cliched ways to answer in that sense, theater is love. My life is infinitely messier and complicated since I married my wife and got 2 stepkids. It is also the most exquisite, extraordinary, life-affirming thing ever. And in that sense, if you look at it, if you look at it in terms of the 401k, I'm going to save a lot less money as a result of this logistical decision I made. I'm going to depart this planet the happiest person I know because of my wife and kids. And in that sense, I don't want to run away from the cliche. It is love. And this is, why it's sort of a sideways yes and to what you said, Robert, because it's not just that we're isolated. We're isolated with a bunch of people who all think the same way, which feels communal, but is further isolating. I mean, it's, and this is why I think, we can go back to January 6th and see a whole bunch of people who were not alone, but I think were isolated themselves and were being isolated by the dishonest storyteller. I sat shortly after Trump was elected.
We don't have
it's actually a short. It's a short story. But I think it gets to this point. It's that someone asked, Congresswoman Schakowsky asked me what was my take through our lens of what happened. And I said, well, if they weren't presidential campaigns and they were movie studios, Trump International Pictures made Transformers 7. Now, it made no sense. It sucked, but there were some movie stars and explosions, and it played 7 to 13 screens in the multiplex, and people had a place to go. I think Secretary Clinton's the most qualified person who's ever run for the office, but the campaign simply put out a press release of all the rights they'd acquired to great properties and said, click here for more information. They didn't tell the story. Trump made the movie. Clinton didn't make the movie. She was right. Better ideas. This is why I want people to embrace what theater is. You can be right over here, but theater is where we do the good. And telling stories about theater and getting that in front of people however we can, this is where we inspire, this is where we persuade, and it can happen on stage, and it can happen with cameras pointed at stage in a theatrical context. That's different from film. Different, when you're being manipulated. It's why all that jazz doesn't feel like live theater to me. That is so filmic, and that's Bob Fosse going, ooh, cameras and edit suites. Whereas, NT Live, watching Benedict Cumberbatch and Johnny Lee Miller mix it up, felt that to me, and my life was changed. As if I was,
But I didn't. I saw that.
I'd love to. I'm going to bring it back to the. I'm going to bring it back to the question, right, of thinking about leaving theater. And we've talked so much about our love for theater and coming back to it for what it gives us. But I had a conversation earlier this week with Becca Levy, another Strawdog company member, about in these moments of crisis. Obviously, we're dealing with a crisis at the moment in the Middle East, and have been over and over again, all these crises. And I think the importance of why we find our way back to theater, right, is that in these moments of crisis, we do what we know how to do best. And for all of us sitting in this room, what we know how to do best is make theater. So we find our way back because this is our way to impact the world. Other people have different ways. A physicist will impact the world through their research, right? A politician will impact through a speech, right? But the way that we impact the world is through theater. And that's why I think we always find our way back, even when it is hard, even when we don't have a 401k.
And that's why they attacked a music festival. They attacked the arts. Right? They tried to hit us where we hurt most. Exactly. That's why people try to defund the arts.
Exactly.
They're trying, but
exactly.
We'll still be here. So we are getting close to wrapping up, and I have got some thank yous to say real quick. But in the meantime, we're going to get back momentarily to we'll get back to our 5 panelists' recommendations. But in the meantime, thank you, number 1, to officehours.global and Guy Cochran, Edwin Ruiz, who's here producing the show tonight, cutting the show. Thank you, Edwin. Mondo Machine and KBH Media for helping make the technical parts of this show possible tonight. Thank you, number 2. The show is made possible by Strawdog Theater Company and its ensemble members. Strawdog is run on a free theater model. All our main stage productions are available to everyone, free of charge. The only way we can make that happen is through generous donations from our community. You can find more information about donating to Strawdog or becoming a sustaining member at strawdog.org/donate. There's a link in the show notes. Thank you. Speaking of Strawdog ensemble members, this is the part that I wrote for another host to say. Speaking of Strawdog ensemble members, thank you, number 3, to Kyle Hammond for creating and producing the show. He's a big fan of the number 3. I tried to lobby to pull this one out, but I was told I had to leave it in. Thank you, number 4, to our audience and community who watch every week and chime in and participate and say we should bet on live theater and such. Without you, our community, this would be just 5 people talking to each other, which is fun in and of itself, but we like to be outward facing. So thank you so much for watching. And thank you, number 5, to our amazing panelists tonight. Thank you for being here this evening, sharing your brilliance. It's been a pleasure talking with you. And the last thing before we go, what do you recommend? I'm going to go backwards from the way we started, which is, Robert, I think you were the finale for What is Theater. So what's your recommendation?
Well, I kind of ended that discussion, at least. The questioning, at least. I know you had Eileen Tull on.
Yes.
What's the Saturday? Yeah. I'm going to underline what I imagine she probably promoted was the play that she has directed, Household Spirits at Theater Wit. Just opened. I am understudying in that show. I'm understudying a good friend of mine. And I've had the opportunity to just watch it and watch it and watch it, and it is just fantastic. I would say everybody just get yourself to see it. It's disturbing and wonderful and funny and moving, and I can't say enough good things about it.
Sweet. Scott, what do you got?
First, I talked too much tonight. Sorry. I want to invite you guys all for drinks on me. I need to listen to it. If you can find the Backroom Shakespeare Midsummer Night's Dream somewhere online, if it's living on YouTube, find it. Short of that, because it's a talk about a brilliant in the moment response. Short of that, I'm a huge fan of Backroom Shakes. If you can go to their website and find Samuel Taylor's book, My Life with the Shakespeare Cult. He's written some follow-ups about basically how they created the Backroom Shakespeare project. But My Life with the Shakespeare Cult, it's very specific in how it, why Samuel is feeling the way he's feeling about how Shakespeare is done and why they started the project, which if you get to see it in Chicago in a bar or restaurant, it's beyond a blast. It's really transformative. Samuel is, if the book's like Samuel, very funny, very smart, brilliantly profane. My Life with the Shakespeare Cult, Samuel Taylor. Also, he makes great pancakes.
I like pancakes. Noah,
pancakes. Go buy them.
I'll just do two quick shout outs. One, I've been rediscovering a book that was super important to me in college, and I'm refinding it now. It was like my Bible in college. I carried it everywhere with me, but the Frantic Assembly Book of Devising, which is just an incredible company, an incredible book, incredible work. And then I also just want to shout out, please come see Herschel and the Hanukkah Goblins with Strawdog this December. It's just an incredible cast, and I hope an incredible new interpretation. So please come check us out.
Go be in the room.
Or watch it online.
Or watch it online.
But go be in the room, because it will be better on screen if there's a room full of people.
If I do my job, yes, I can't argue with that.
Yes.
All right, you got me there.
You button it, yes.
Audrey.
I would be remiss if I didn't tell y'all to come see Revolution at A Red Orchid Theatre. It's funny, it's wonderful. Natalie West is and
how much longer are you running? How much longer are you running?
We just extended to November 5th.
Cool.
So you still have a couple more weeks to come see it. It's really wonderful. Brett Neveu was just on the show, so hopefully he talked about it.
Oh yeah.
Well. I caught half of that one. But it's beautifully written, and the cast, Stephanie Shum, Taylor Blim, Natalie West, they're so good together, y'all. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely,
please come see it.
Really looking forward to it.
Sweet. Awesome. Thank you all. Those are wonderful recommendations. And I can't
Kyle, do you have a recommendation?
Oh, I'm gonna cheat. I met the last time I've been on the panel, so I just wanted to be clear. I have been on the panel, but I've never been the host. This is the first time hosting. The last time I was on the panel, I mentioned that my wife said I should get this book, and I didn't know what it was. But now I have it. So it's After the Ivory Tower Falls, How College Broke the American Dream and Blew Up Our Politics, and How to Fix It.
Super short title.
I can't wait to learn how to fix our American dream and our politics and all of those things. I haven't started reading.
What's it about?
It's about
200 pages.
It's about this thick. Yeah. It's about that thick, and you could probably prop up some stuff with it. But no, it's great. I can't wait to read it. Thank you again. Thanks for all of the panelists for being here. Thank you, and thank you all for watching. And please check back next week for more. Thank you, 5.